They laughed together when the world wasn't watching. They comforted each other when life became unbearable. But behind every smile, there was a silence, one that carried heartbreak, pride, and regret. For years, Elton John hid the truth about his bond with Princess Diana, a connection that was tender, fragile, and tested by the cruel spotlight of fame. He had seen her laugh when her heart was breaking. She had seen him weep when no one else dared to ask why. They were two souls surrounded by royalty and fame, yet each felt the sting of loneliness more deeply than anyone could imagine. And now, after decades of silence, Elton is finally ready to reveal the story, the night it all began, the night that changed them both forever. It was the summer of 1981, a time when the world was enchanted by the image of a young woman named Diana Spencer, shy, graceful, radiant, about to marry the future King of England. But while Britain was dreaming of a fairy tale, Elton John was about to find something far more real, a friendship that would redefine the meaning of loyalty, laughter, and love. The night was one of grandeur and glitter, Prince Andrew's 21st birthday celebration, held within the sacred walls of Windsor Castle. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, pearls, and polished shoes. Royalty filled the room, and every movement seemed rehearsed, every smile perfectly measured. At the piano sat Elton John, dressed modestly by his standards, no sequins, no feathers, just quiet elegance. He was nervous, feeling like an outsider among dukes and duchesses. He had performed for the Queen Mother, shared jokes with Prince Philip, even charmed Princess Margaret with his wit. Yet, despite his fame, he had never truly belonged in their world. Then he saw her. Across the ballroom, a young woman entered, and time seemed to pause. Diana Spencer, not yet a princess, but already radiating something deeper than beauty. It was warmth, humanity, light. She moved with effortless grace, her laughter soft but magnetic. Elton later wrote in his autobiography, Me, she had an incredible social ease, an ability to make anyone feel completely comfortable in her company. When their eyes met, something shifted. He smiled, she smiled back. Not the polite smile of royalty, but one of genuine kindness. Within minutes, they were chatting like lifelong friends. They giggled about the stiff formality of the party, teasing the dull rhythm of the music. Then came the moment that changed everything. Diana dared him to dance. So there, in the middle of Windsor's royal ballroom, among the tiaras and champagne flutes, a rock star and a future princess mimed the Charleston, laughing uncontrollably. Even the Queen noticed and smiled. Later, Elton said, "That night, I felt as if I'd known her forever." For Diana, the laughter was a brief escape, just weeks away from stepping into a royal life ruled by silence and scrutiny. For Elton, she was a revelation, unpretentious, quick-witted, and full of heart. They were opposites in every sense, yet their spirits recognized each other instantly. That night marked the birth of an extraordinary friendship, one that neither fame nor tragedy could ever erase. Through the 1980s and into the early 1990s, their bond deepened beyond public understanding. Whenever Elton John and Princess Diana appeared together at charity galas, royal events, or private gatherings, cameras flashed and headlines followed. To the world, they were symbols of glamour, but behind the laughter and glitz was something far more human, a friendship built on honesty, vulnerability, and pain. Diana had a rare gift, the power to make anyone, even the most powerful, feel at ease. Yet behind the grace and charm, she was often anything but at peace. Her marriage to Prince Charles was crumbling, the walls of Kensington Palace closing in like a gilded cage. The tabloids fed on her loneliness, her tears, her every move. She was trapped between royalty and humanity, between duty and the desperate need to be loved. Elton understood that feeling all too well. Behind the sequins, the fame, and the thunder of applause, he carried his own battles with addiction, self-doubt, and the fear of never being truly accepted. They recognized that pain in each other, and that recognition forged a trust that words could never capture. Together, they turned their struggles into purpose. Diana joined Elton in championing causes that most royals avoided, especially AIDS awareness, at a time when fear and stigma dominated public perception. The moment she reached out and shook the hands of AIDS patients, without gloves, without hesitation, changed the world's view forever. Elton later said, "That simple act of compassion transformed how people saw the disease. It was the moment I realized just how fearless she really was." But their friendship wasn't all solemnity and sorrow. There was laughter, endless laughter. Diana had a mischievous sense of humor that perfectly matched Elton's. She'd tease him about his flamboyant outfits, and he'd mock the rigid etiquette of palace life. At dinners, she'd lean over and whisper, "Oh, here comes this snob squad," sending them both into a stifled giggles. And then there was that infamous night, a private dinner in London where Richard Gere and Sylvester Stallone nearly came to blows over Diana's attention. Elton, ever the storyteller, would later recall, "They were utterly bewitched. She could bring Hollywood to its knees with a smile." Yet beneath the laughter, Diana's pain never truly faded. She battled bulimia, sleepless nights, and the constant ache of feeling unloved. When the world demanded her perfection, she confided in Elton, sometimes in quiet tears, sometimes through letters only he would ever read. They had become like siblings, teasing, protective, sometimes even quarreling. But as fame and fatigue began to take their toll, even the closest bonds can crack, and soon pride and misunderstanding would push them into a silence neither could escape. By the mid-1990s, their friendship had become one of the most talked about relationships between a royal and a rock star. They had weathered scandals, laughed through chaos, and stood by each other when the rest of the world turned away. But in 1996, a single misunderstanding, born not of malice but of pride and pressure, would shatter the bond they had built over 15 years. It began with a project close to Elton's heart, a charity coffee table book celebrating the art of rock photography. It wasn't just another publication, it was a tribute to music, creativity, and compassion. Every penny raised would go to AIDS foundations, a cause both he and Diana had fiercely supported. When Diana agreed to write the foreword, Elton was overjoyed. Her name on the project wasn't just a symbol, it was a statement. The people's princess standing beside those the world had turned away from. But then the letter arrived. It came quietly, sealed in Kensington Palace stationery. Polite, formal, distant. Diana had decided to withdraw. No warning, no explanation, just a few lines that left Elton stunned. Later, he learned the truth, that Buckingham Palace advisors had objected to her involvement. The photographs in the book included semi-nude male models, and the palace feared it might compromise royal dignity. Elton was furious, not at Diana herself, but at what he saw as a betrayal of courage. The very courage she had once embodied. To him, it felt like she had retreated into the cage she once fought to escape. On Larry King Live years later, Elton admitted, "I wasn't too happy, and I let her know that." He sent her a message, sharp, frustrated, full of hurt. Diana, cornered and exhausted, replied with what Elton later called a tart letter. It was cold, final. After that, there was silence. For months, they didn't speak. Diana had just finalized her divorce from Prince Charles. She'd lost her royal title, her Royal Highness, and along with it, a piece of her identity. Hounded by paparazzi, betrayed by friends, and suffocated by palace politics, she was adrift. Elton, meanwhile, buried himself in work and charity, pretending the distance didn't wound him as deeply as it did. Later he confessed, "We were both too proud. I should have picked up the phone, but I didn't." And before they could fix it, time ran out. For nearly a year, they lived separate lives, each haunted by what they'd lost. Their friendship, once full of laughter and trust, now lingered like a song left unfinished. But fate had one more verse to play. It was July 15th, 1997. The world awoke to the shocking news that Gianni Versace, the legendary Italian designer and a dear friend to both Elton and Diana, had been shot and killed outside his Miami Beach mansion. The headlines screamed tragedy, but for Elton and Diana, it was personal. They had both adored Versace, not just for his artistry, but for his kindness. Diana had modeled one of his dresses for Harper's Bazaar in 1991, and she often described him as a true friend who understood beauty and pain alike. When she heard the news, she reportedly turned to her bodyguard and whispered, "Do you think they'll do that to me too?" It was a chilling foreshadowing, one that would prove heartbreakingly prophetic. At Versace's funeral in Milan, Elton arrived devastated, his eyes hidden behind dark glasses, his grief barely contained. The cathedral was a sea of black veils, flashing cameras, and broken hearts. And then, across the aisle, he saw her, Princess Diana, elegant, poised. But beneath her calm exterior, tears shimmered in her eyes. They hadn't spoken in nearly a year, but grief has a way of dissolving pride. As the ceremony ended, Diana walked toward Elton, slowly, hesitantly. Then she reached for his hand. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "It was silly. Our falling out, let's be friends again." In that moment, something inside him broke. The anger, the hurt, the silence, all of it melted away. And in true Diana fashion, just as tears welled in Elton's eyes, she lightened the air with humor. "God, I'd love a polo," she said suddenly, making him laugh through the sadness. It was classic Diana. Compassion and wit wrapped into one. They promised to see each other again soon, to start fresh, to put the past behind them. But destiny had other plans. Just 6 weeks later, Elton's phone would ring in the dead of night, and the world would never be the same again. It was the early morning of August 31st, 1997. Elton John was asleep at home when the whirring sound of his fax machine broke the silence. A message came through, short, confusing, and devastating. "So sorry to hear about this awful news." He blinked, groggy, uncertain. Then he turned on the television, and the world seemed to stop breathing. Princess Diana? Gone. Killed in a horrific car crash in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris. Paparazzi had chased her until the very last moment. She was only 36 years old. Elton stood frozen, staring at the screen. Just 6 weeks earlier, she had been laughing with him at Versace's funeral, alive, radiant, full of plans, and now she was gone. He later said, It felt unreal. We'd just made peace, and suddenly she was taken away. The phone rang nonstop. The Spencer family reached out to him personally, asking for one final favor: to perform at her funeral. Elton didn't hesitate. He turned to his longtime lyricist, Bernie Taupin, and together they reworked one of his most famous songs, Candle in the Wind, originally written in 1973 for Marilyn Monroe. This time, the words were for Diana. The new version began, "Goodbye, England's rose, may you ever grow in our hearts." On September 6, 1997, inside Westminster Abbey, Elton sat before millions watching around the world. His hands trembled as he touched the piano keys. The room was silent, no applause, no whispers, just the sound of grief. He began to play. Each note echoed like a heartbeat. Each word carried the weight of a world in mourning. It wasn't a performance, he later said. It was a farewell. When the song ended, even the stoic faces of royalty were streaked with tears. The moment was timeless, raw, sacred, and unforgettable. Candle in the Wind, 1997, went on to sell over 33 million copies, becoming the best-selling single in history. Yet Elton never celebrated its success. He once confessed, "It felt morbid. Why would anyone want to listen to it? It wasn't a hit, it was a wound that never healed." And so, behind the fame of that song lay a promise, one Elton had made silently as he sang, to protect her memory and to look after the two young boys she left behind. Years passed, but Elton John never forgot the promise he made on that sorrowful day. He vowed to honor Diana's memory, not with grand speeches, but through quiet action, through the compassion she had once inspired in him. Whenever Prince William or Prince Harry faced the relentless glare of the press, Elton stood by them, protecting them like family. "I feel a deep sense of duty," he said, "to shield Harry and his family from the same intrusion that destroyed Diana's peace." He hosted them at his home in France, away from the cameras, a sanctuary where laughter could exist again, where memories of Diana were spoken not with tears, but with warmth. Yet, even decades later, the guilt of their brief estrangement still haunted him. "If I could go back," Elton admitted, "I'd have picked up the phone. I'd have said sorry. Life's too short for pride." He came to believe that Diana's withdrawal from the charity project years earlier hadn't been her choice at all, that palace pressure and politics had forced her hand, a painful reminder of how often her voice had been silenced by forces beyond her control. Their friendship had been unlike anything else, a rock star and a princess, both prisoners of fame, bound by empathy and understanding. Through her, Elton rediscovered compassion and purpose. Through him, Diana found a safe space where she could simply be human, not Her Royal Highness, not the people's princess, but just Diana. When Elton plays today and the crowd quiets, there's always a pause, a stillness between the chords, and somewhere in that silence, he still hears her laughter. She proved, he once said, that kindness and honesty could exist in a world built on image. That's what made her unforgettable. Their story was one of truth, broken by pride, healed by forgiveness, and immortalized by a song. And though the candle burned out long ago, the light, her light, still shines in every act of compassion that bears her name. Decades later, the world still mourns her, and Elton still carries her memory like a candle that never went out. And so, the world remembers them, the rock star and the princess, two souls who found in each other what the crown and the stage could never give: understanding, Their laughter still echoes through history, their story whispered wherever compassion endures. For Elton John, every note of Candle in the Wind is more than a song. It's a memory, a confession, and a promise kept. And for Princess Diana, her legacy lives not only in her sons, but in the countless lives she touched simply by caring when others looked away. Perhaps that's why, even now, when we see Elton at his piano, the lights dim, the crowd silent, we can almost feel her presence there beside him, smiling, free at last. Because love, once pure, never truly dies. It lingers like a melody that refuses to fade. What about you, friends? Do you believe their bond was fate? Or two lost souls finding comfort in each other's pain? Tell us in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to keep the untold truths of Hollywood's most human moments alive